Hi everyone. Over the last weeks and months, I've wanted to make a video about how the Imperium of Man could conceivably defeat the Tyranids, or at least those Tyranid hive fleets present in the Milky Way galaxy. The first recorded contact between the Imperium and the Tyranids took place on the eastern fringes of the galaxy in 745 M41. However, it is rumoured that the Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition may possibly have identified this xenospecies even as far back as the 35th millennium. The Tyranids emerged from the intergalactic space of nearby galaxies. The hive mind was drawn to the Milky Way galaxy by the psychic beacon of the Astronomicon, transmitted by the Emperor's presence in the warp from Terra. The first officially recorded contact with the Tyranids for the Imperium of Man came during a Tyranid attack on an ocean world called Tyran, and from there Hive Fleet Behemoth continued directly towards the center of the galaxy, consuming all the worlds in its path. Although the Tyranids were defeated by the efforts of the Ultramarines during the Battle of Macragge, the Ultramarines, however, suffered devastating losses that would take centuries to replace. Since then, the Tyranids have emerged as one of the main threats facing the Imperium of Man, and I think it's interesting to speculate about the different ways in which the Imperium could possibly defeat the Tyranids. One possibility is to ally with the Eldar. The Eldar race is millions of years older than humanity and participated in the war in heaven against the Necrons. The Eldar are technologically and psychically light years ahead of the Imperium, yet they are a dying race. After the birth of Slaanesh and the fall of the Eldari, the Eldar are a shadow of their former selves. However, they still have advanced technology and their craft worlds are extremely powerful. If the Imperium of Man was to cooperate or ally with even one craft world, this would significantly boost the Imperium's capability of fighting the Tyranids. There are numerous examples of the Imperium and Eldar working together to fight a common enemy, but this is always seen as an alliance of convenience, and once the common foe has been defeated, the alliance breaks down. Some notable examples of cooperation include Tallarn, where the Imperium and Biltan craft world fought against Chaos, and more recently in the 13th Black Crusade, where Imperial and Eldar ships fought against Abaddon's forces on numerous occasions. One problem with this possibility is that the majority of Eldar see humans as little more than animals, referring to them as Monkey. On the other hand, the average human, having been indoctrinated since birth to purge the Xenos, would be unlikely to accept any cooperation with aliens of any kind. Despite this, we need to remember that it is in part thanks to the Eldar that Rabute Gilliman was brought back from near death. It is interesting that it took the Eldar, a more far-sighted race, to realize that what the Imperium needs now is a hero, a symbol of the Emperor's will made manifest, namely, that the Imperium needed a Primarch. On Callisis, Yvraine was part of the Eldar expedition that met the Imperial survivors of the 13th Black Crusade. There they forged an alliance with humanity, guiding them to Ultramar. Yvraine had departed the craft world Biltan in search of long-lost artifacts known as the Crone Swords, and she formulated a desperate plan to turn back the tides of chaos. It is while she was on this mission that Yvraine was brought through the webway to the frozen moon of Clysis in orbit of the fortress world of Khazar Holm in the Cadia system, leading an army of the Eldar from every faction who once more laid claim to the ancient name of Eldari. They emerged from the moon's webway gate just in time to rescue the Celestinian crusade from their pursuers. Driving off the heretic Astartes, the Black Legion, the Inari negotiated common cause with the humans, agreeing to aid them in reaching the realm of Ultramar. As warp storms billowed and spread across the galaxy, the assembled pilgrims hastened through the webway. Once they had arrived on Macragge, Yvraine worked closely with Belisarius Cawl to resurrect Roboute Guilliman. After Guilliman was reborn, Yvraine and the Visarch bid their farewells to the Imperials, and since then the craft world Biltan has had friendly relations with Roboute Guilliman. An alliance with Biltan, or at least enhanced cooperation, is to my mind one of the most practical and likely options open to the Imperium. The two factions have a history of working together when fighting a common enemy, and the Eldar have the necessary technology and fighting prowess to be able to make a difference in any fight against the Tyranids. Of particular interest is the Eldar weapon known as D-Scythes, which I will discuss next. D-Scythes, or Distortion Scythes, are advanced Eldar Vortex weapons. Considered a sinister and taboo weapon, D-Scythes can rip the soul of an enemy from their body and banish it to the warp. When fired, a D-Scythe emits no visible blast and leaves behind no damage, save the motionless corpse of those targeted. D-Scythes are considered so fiendish that no mortal could wield them, and are only wielded by the Wraith Guards. The Eldar call the act of separating the spirit from its body cutting of the crone's cord. For in Eldar lore, a strand ties the soul of a being to its material form. Tradition has it that only the crone goddess Morai Heg herself has the right to sever this connection. For a mortal doing so is merely playing God. However, as the desperate situation for the Eldar continues, more militant autarchs have called for more frequent deployment of these weapons. There is another variant called Heavy D-Scythes, which are a heavier version of this D-Scythe commonly mounted under the wings of Hemlock Wraith fighters. Originally designed to sever the link between Tyranids and the Hive mind, these powerful weapons can even scramble the engrams of soulless beings such as Necrons. Given that the Eldar have access to weapons which were specifically designed to sever the link between Tyranids and the Hive mind, in my opinion this would be the perfect weapon to combat Tyranid hive fleets threatening the galaxy. Even if the Eldar were not willing to share this technology with the Imperium, one could envision a scenario where the Space Marines function as the tip of the spear and get the Eldar units close enough to a Norn Queen or other synapse creatures, killing the commanding creature and thus disrupting the hive mind. With the hive mind disrupted, it has been observed that the Tyranid creatures will revert to aggressive, animalistic behavior and will turn on each other. A similar situation occurred in the Battle of Tarsus Ultra, when Uriel Ventress injected a biological plague based on Lictor DNA into a Norn Queen. This disrupted the Hive Queen, and the various Tyranid bioforms turned on each other, crippling Hive Fleet Leviathan in the process. The next race I'd like to talk about is the Necrons. The Necrons are a race of robotic warriors that have lain dormant in their stasis tombs for more than 60 million Terran years, and who are the soulless creations and former servants of the ancient Catan. The Necrons are a truly ancient race, predating even the birth of the Eldari. At long last, however, they are beginning to awaken from their tomb worlds, for the galaxy is ripe for conquest and the restoration of the Necron Empire since the disappearance of the Old Ones more than 60 million standard years ago. The Necrons are a completely robotic, humanoid species whose technological prowess is probably unmatched by any of the other intelligent species of the galaxy. As a result of their technological superiority, the Necrons have a number of advantages over the Tyranids, which will be discussed further. One advantage the Necrons have is that they do not travel through the warp like other races. They use the inertialess drive, which is a non-Newtonian, reactionless form of voidcraft propulsion that allows a vessel equipped with it to move through space without any form of inertia. This allows the Voidcraft to travel faster than the speed of light in real space without increasing its mass to an infinite size or requiring an infinite amount of power. Inertialess propulsion systems are used exclusively by the Necrons, who are capable of interstellar travel without the need to enter the warp when using this technology. As a result, the Necrons are immune to the Tyranids' shadow in the warp, which gives them a considerable advantage in space combat. As mentioned, the Necrons are a robotic race composed of metal and necrodermis. Thus, there is no biomass for the Tyranids to consume, and when damaged, Necron soldiers can be teleported away to be rebuilt when possible, allowing them to replenish their numbers. This removes another key advantage the Tyranids have over other races. Without the ability to consume Necrons, the Tyranids would have a difficult time trying to conquer a Necron tomb world. Any losses the Tyranids sustain cannot be easily replenished, and they run the risk of suffering a net loss of biomass if they are unsuccessful in conquering the entire planet. Yet another advantage the Necrons have is their use of Gauze Weapons. Gauze Weapons tear targets apart at the molecular level, and the larger Gauze cannons are able to rip through an Astartes power armor with ease. These types of weapons would be able to rip through the armored carapaces of even the largest Tyranid bioforms. When the situation becomes dire, the Necrons are able to draw upon the power of Catan shards, also pronounced Satan. The shards are extremely powerful and have the power to project energy blasts, control the minds of lesser beings, manipulate the flow of time, and even banish their enemies to alternate realities. The only limitation to a shard is its immense imagination and the faint memories of the being it used to be before it was severed from the whole being it once was, countless years ago. None of the shards recall the omnipotent being it used to be, but each contains the elements of the Catan's personality along with their hubris. Thus a shard can be eccentric and unpredictable. They have been known to strike their foes in an unexpected yet surprisingly practical manner. From their fingertips they can project trans-dimensional thunderbolts, or bombard enemies with rocks, transform into singularities to destabilize gravity, or even simply fling their enemies backwards in time until they disintegrate. If the Necrons were close to defeat in a battle against the Tyranids, then they would be able to call upon Catan shards, essentially enabling them to win almost any battle. However, the number of shards which the Necrons have access to is limited, and the dangers and risks of using a shard would often outweigh the benefit of using such an unpredictable weapon. The Necrons couldn't simply whip out a shard every time they fought the Tyranids, but rather would keep them for the most extreme emergencies. Because of the drawbacks and risks involved with using Catan shards, the Tyranids could conceivably attack Necron worlds simultaneously, or as simultaneously as one can get on a galactic scale, and wear down Necron worlds where shards could not be deployed in time. The Necrons also have access to a wide array of weapons of mass destruction. Two examples are the Celestial Ori and Ionic Orbs. The Celestial Ori is a device located at the heart of the Necron Oruskar dynasty's crown world of Thanatos. The Ori projects a web of holograms that represents every star in the galaxy. Its representation of the galaxy is not just a model, because the Ori is the galaxy in miniature. Altering the Ori, say causing a star orbited by a Tyranid Hive fleet to go supernova, will also physically change that region of the galaxy. The Ori can also be used to predict the strategic flow of coming events, or even alter them outright. An act such as causing a star to go supernova cannot be performed without consideration, however, as each star destroyed in this fashion upsets the fundamental forces of creation, setting off a catastrophic chain reaction. Only with the further manipulation of the celestial Ori can these forces be returned to their proper balance, and this takes thousands of standard years of constant and precise micromanagement. Another weapon is Ionic Orbs. The Ionic Orb is the rarest and perhaps the most powerful of the weapons devised by the advanced technology of the Necrons, intended to destroy the largest and most potent enemy units, such as Titans, with the fire of a star. First created during the War in Heaven against the Old Ones, an Ionic Orb was crafted from the living metal of the Necrons' own undying bodies, necrodermis. This was the only material strong enough to withstand the raging plasma and gravitational force generated by the fragment of a star that was housed within the orb's containment field. The Necrons are not known to deploy such ionic weapons very often, and are presumably difficult to construct and use effectively. However, the mere fact that the Necrons have access to such powerful devices indicates that they could cripple or even completely disintegrate even the largest and most powerful Tyranid invasions. A further advantage the Necrons have is that their overlords have millennia of experience, and they do not age. This wealth of learning and experience, backed up with their extraordinary technological basis, means that they would be able to come up with tactics and strategies which the other races would be incapable of thinking up, let alone implementing. The Silent King. The final order of Sarek, the Silent King, was to sever the command protocols that allowed him to control his subjects directly, and went into a self-imposed exile in the intergalactic void as his penance for the Necron tier signing away their physical bodies and even their souls in the process to become what we call the Necrons. However, in the late 41st millennium, the Necrons had begun their Great Awakening, and Sarek returned to the galaxy after discovering the approaching Tyranid hive fleets during his sojourn in the intergalactic void. The Silent King recognized that the Tyranids are a major threat to his people's chances of reconquering the galaxy and regaining their organic forms. It was Sarek's dream that the Necrons might find an organic species whose bodies would prove to be suitable vessels for Necron minds, thus finally ending the curse of biotransference. However, if the Tyranids were allowed to consume all life in the Milky Way galaxy, there would be no species left to serve as Necron vessels, and so the Silent King now travels the galaxy, seeking to awaken and unite his people against this terrible extragalactic foe. The Silent King, however, had not anticipated the state in which the majority of the Necrons still lie. Many tomb worlds have been destroyed over the eons, others still slumber, and most of those that had awoken by the time of the late 41st millennium were still disorientated or somehow damaged. The Silent King was therefore forced to re-evaluate his plans. Working with the surviving Triarch Praetorians, he began a pilgrimage across the galaxy, stirring those tomb worlds yet to revive, and speeding the recovery of those tomb worlds already awake. It is the Silent King's current wish that the younger race's flawed attempts to destroy the Tyranids do not simply feed the Hive fleets beyond the point where even a united Necron people have any hope of victory. The Necrons under Sarek, the Silent King, formed an alliance with the Blood Angels and Dante to stop a Tyranid Hive fleet, though this was after the Necrons attacked the world in question to set up a trap to defeat the Tyranids, but the Blood Angels interfered, costing the Necrons time and resources. The Silent King left the Blood Angels in the front lines and only intervened at the last moment when his forces were needed to stop the Tyranids. The Blood Angels suffered massive losses while the Necrons were able to preserve much of their forces. Over 10,000 years ago, the Silent King met Sanguinius, the Primarch of the Blood Angels, and had great respect for him. Sarek believed a true alliance between the Necrons and Imperium could have been formed if Sanguinius had not fallen. However, it's unknown if the Silent King would have helped another chapter of Space Marines if the opportunity for an alliance had arisen. Based on the Silent King's previous actions, and the fact that the sole reason he ended his self-imposed exile was because of the threat which the Tyranids posed to the galaxy, I think it's reasonable to conclude that if the Imperium was looking for an ally, then the Silent King would be one of the best possibilities. Sarek is currently moving from Tombworld to Tombworld, waking up Necrons where possible in order to fight the Tyranids. If the Imperium could ally with Sarek against the Tyranids, even if this alliance was temporary, then I think the combined forces of the Necrons and Imperium of Man could defeat the Tyranids in the Milky Way galaxy. The question of what would happen to the Imperium after the Tyranids have been defeated, along with the resurgent Necron Empire, is a topic for another day. The idea of trapping a Hive fleet once it has committed significant forces to a planet and then calling down exterminatus is often discussed. The challenges with this strategy is being able to pinpoint where the Tyranids are going to strike next, and having ships in that particular system that are able to get to the planet in time to launch the torpedoes into the planet's atmosphere without getting destroyed by the Tyranids. I have often wondered if a Hive fleet's movements can be predicted. If a world makes frequent contact through astropathic communications, one should be able to detect when a world goes dark and plot the progress. Another idea would be to use gene stealer cults as beacons. If the Imperium detected a cult on a planet of only nominal value, but doesn't destroy the cult and allows it to call in a Hive fleet, could you set a trap for the Tyranids? Once the Tyranids land and begin consuming the planet, the Imperial Navy could call exterminatus on the planet and wipe out the invasion force and cost the Hive a great deal of biomass. If the Hive fleet's next intended target can be predicted, then the Imperium could amass a huge fleet to lie in wait for the Tyranids, and as the bioships enter the system, the Imperial Navy could engage them en masse. In the invasion of Baal, a similar tactic was used by the Blood Angels and their successor chapters. A massive fleet was brought together and was able to destroy a great many bioships before they were able to make planetfall. However, given that Hive Fleet Leviathan is said to have had hundreds of thousands of bioships, it is clear that against the very largest of swarms, the Navy will only be able to reduce the number of Tyranids that land on a planet, and not completely eliminate them. It is worth noting that the Imperium has an advantage in space combat, since almost all Navy ships have void shields, which the Tyranids do not, and once the larger synapse creatures have been killed, the individual Tyranid ships no longer fight as a unified force and then can even turn on each other. I put forward that trying to trap a Hive fleet or predicting its next target is a more effective way of combating the Tyranids than conducting a scorched earth policy. Calling down exterminatus on a planet that lies in the path of a Hive fleet is imprecise and costly. Yes, the Imperium does have over 1 million habitable worlds under its control, but each planet is valuable, and exterminating all life on a planet before the Tyranids have even arrived is incredibly wasteful and imprecise. To my mind, it makes more sense to station ships in systems that are in the path of an incoming Hive fleet and fight a series of running battles. Once the Navy is no longer able to defeat a Hive fleet in a particular system, the Navy withdraws and waits for the Tyranids to commit their forces to the planetary invasion. Then once the Tyranids have landed the majority of its forces, the Navy swoops in and launches cyclonic torpedoes, thus wiping out a large portion of the Hive and denying the Tyranids of biomass. Alternatively, canisters containing the Life Eater virus could be hidden on the planet, which are activated upon the transmission of a signal or even a timer. This way, only a small number of ships would be needed to stay in the system and then activate the signal to release the virus at the optimal time when the Tyranids are fully deployed to the planet. The Octarius War is a major conflict being waged between the Tyranid Hive Fleet Leviathan and the powerful Orc Empire of Octarius. By the end of the 41st millennium, the Imperium was beset by the third and mightiest Tyranid Hive Fleet Leviathan. As the swarm rampaged through the southern plain of the galaxy, Inquisitor Kryptman desperately looked for an answer to the Tyranid threat. Looking to the Orc Empire of Octarius, Kryptman devised a plan to utilize mankind's oldest foe against the invading Tyranids, and in the best case scenario, kill two birds with one stone. Kryptman led several specially equipped Deathwatch teams into the caverns of Carpathia to attempt to capture a brood of live gene stealers in a stasis field. The mission was successful, and Kryptman then planted the brood on board the Perdition's Flame, a space hulk that emerged from the warp in the path of Leviathan. As the gene stealers awoke, he destroyed the moon of Geist in order to divert the hulk's trajectory directly toward the Octarius Empire. As the space hulk entered the Octarius Empire, it was boarded by Orc looters seeking to plunder it, but they were quickly ambushed and impregnated by the gene stealers. These orcs went on to spread the infestation across the entire Octarius sector. After preliminary skirmishes with the invading gene stealers, war bosses from the Blood Axes tried to intercept and destroy the infestation. Even though they were successful, a tendril of Leviathan changed course towards the psychic signal of the gene stealers and invaded the Empire. The Fiend of Octarius, Blacktooth, launched a counter-invasion directly into the oncoming Hive fleet. Despite the Orcs' efforts, a dozen worlds in the Octarius Empire became infected by the Tyranids within weeks. Currently, the Octarius War continues to escalate. In 997 of M41, several Eldar war hosts entered the war, fighting against both Imperial and Orc forces. In 999 M41, many Imperial worlds were caught in the crossfire as the same Han Eldar entered the war, and the Raven Guard, White Scars, and Salamander's chapters united to defend the embattled planets. Whether the Orcs or the Tyranids win the war, the victor will emerge stronger than before. Orcs from light years around are flocking to Octarius and are growing bigger and stronger on their diet of conflict. Every orc devoured gives more biomass to the growing Tyranid swarm, which is constantly learning and adapting new ways to defeat their enemies. Kryptman succeeded in luring Leviathan to the Octarius Empire, but rather than tricking both sides into destroying each other, his plan has backfired into starting a series of events that is making the Imperium's enemies even stronger. Gaskell's arrival. One of the main threats to emerge is the infamous Orc warlord Gaskell Thraka. Gaskell arrived in the Octarius sector after having grown bored of the Third War for Armageddon and proclaimed that he was beginning a new war. By this point, the Orc forces in the sector were under the control of Zog Steeltooth, who had risen to power after Gorsnik Magosh had joined the fighting on Armageddon. Seeing the opportunity for a good fight, Gaskell came to the aid of the Orcs of Octarius, and after slaying a mighty Morlock, has rallied the Greenskins to his cause. After reorganizing and reinvigorating the Greenskin cause in Octarius, Gaskell departed and is now leading an armada of 5 million warships toward the Imperium. To me, this whole episode shows how risky it is to play one enemy off against another, especially enemies like the Orcs and the Tyranids. Either the Orcs will emerge victorious and have a huge battle-hardened army that will then turn its eyes on the Imperium after having grown far larger and stronger than normal due to exposure to battle as Orcs do, or the Tyranids will win out against the orcs, consume all the biomass, and have developed even more vicious, lethal bioforms, and then move on to attack the Imperium, even stronger and more numerous than before. Another idea is to draw the Hive fleet into the Eye of Terror. There's a very good chance it would be destroyed or fatally weakened. Chaos could fight the Hive fleet, and in fact the Chaos Gods have every reason to do so. The big four Chaos Gods want more souls, not to have every sentient being in the galaxy consumed, and thus end the flow of souls into the Immaterium. This idea, just lure the Tyranids into the Eye of Terror, and the forces of chaos will simply finish them off, is to me a bit simplistic. Also, it ignores something: the existence of Hive Fleet Kronos. The raw matter of chaos is anathema to the Tyranids, for it is inconstant and ethereal, possessing none of the nourishment that the Hive Fleet needs. Thus, the Tyranids, whenever possible, avoid areas plagued by warp storms and demonic activity. As the impure essence of the Immaterium pours into real space across the galaxy following the birth of the Great Rift, also known as the Cicatrix Maledictum, it has become increasingly difficult for the Tyranid hives to obtain sources of biomass in warp-affected areas. Thus, the Hive Fleet has been forced to react to a looming catastrophe, and Hive Fleet Kronos appears to be the Hive Mind's first solution. This new terror is tracing a coreward path along the line of the Great Rift. Tendrils of Hive Fleet Leviathan have diverted from their original course, leaving behind defenseless worlds for Kronos to consume. The nascent Hive Fleet appears to be zeroing in on areas of intense psychic activity that threaten to tear the breach between realities wider. Scores of planets conquered by chaos-worshipping cultists and warp-spawned abominations have fallen in its path, and Kronos has consumed them all. Psychers, chaos worshippers, and the creatures of the warp are the favoured quarry of Hive Fleet Kronos. The organisms spawned by its bioships are perfectly designed to eradicate the taint of the Materium. I think the fact that Hive Fleet Kronos even exists counters the argument that the Immaterium and the forces of chaos are the perfect answer to stopping the Tyranids. Kronos is specifically designed to fight against Psychers, the forces of chaos, and in warp-touch places. It is in the interests of chaos to eliminate the Tyranids, but I would hardly call chaos a magic bullet. If the forces of chaos were to stop fighting each other in the Great Game, and turn their attention to eliminating or at least severely hurting the Tyranid hive fleets, threatening the Milky Way, then I think the Imperium would have a much better chance of defeating the Tyranids. It is in the interest of chaos to at the very least destroy Hive Fleet Kronos, since that Hive Fleet poses the main threat, but simply luring a Hive Fleet into the Eye of Terror would not necessarily mean that the Hive Fleet would be automatically destroyed. The Tyranids generally avoid the Immaterium, and it would be difficult to lure them into the warp. They have no reason to go there. I think it is more likely the case that the Chaos Gods, seeing that their source of souls is in jeopardy, would send their forces out into real space and fight the Hives, creating the biggest problems for them. Turning off the Astronomicon is another theory that is floating around. It is known that the Tyranids are attracted to the Astronomicon. However, simply turning off the Astronomicon would spell disaster for the Imperium of Man. Ship navigators would no longer be able to orientate themselves in the warp by using the Astronomicon as a lighthouse or guiding star. This would force ships to only take small jumps of a few light years rather than taking long, extended journeys through the warp. This would slow interstellar travel to a crawl. The Imperium would be crippled economically and militarily without interstellar travel. Therefore, simply turning off the Astronomicon, in my opinion, would not be a feasible option. Another option is to use the Pharaohs Device. The Pharaohs Device mimics the Astronomicon, but on a smaller scale, and was used by the Ultramarines back in the days of the Horus Heresy. The Pharaohs Device, or a device which duplicates its function, could be used to replace the Astronomicon once it has been turned off. Or a Pharaohs Device could be used to lure Hive fleets away from the Imperium and into Xenospace, or to parts of the galaxy where the Imperium has no colonies. The Imperium could use a Pharaohs Device to lure a Hive fleet to a system where a massive Imperial fleet is waiting for them, or lure a Hive fleet to a planet owned by a powerful, technologically advanced Xenos race, such as the Tau, Necron, or even the Quarrel. Once the Hive fleet has fought the Xeno civilization, if the Hive fleet has survived and is beginning to consume the planet, the Imperial Navy could come back and destroy the Tyranids in its weakened state. If the Xeno civilization succeeds in defeating the Hive fleet, the Imperium can come back in and conquer the planet, which has now been severely weakened by the Tyranid attack. The Red Planet is ruled over by the Adeptus Mechanicus' Fabricator General, and he possesses almost every known piece of standard template construct STC technology or designs currently in Imperial hands. This is ostensibly so he can construct better and more powerful vehicles and technology for the Imperium, although it is fairly clear that the Mechanicus is simply hoarding them. In the event of a massive invasion of the Segmentum Solar, or the possible loss of Terra or Mars, I put forward that the Mechanicus would make all of its technology available in order to ensure their survival. Despite the fact that the Imperium of Man has been regressing in terms of technology, a great deal of highly advanced weapons and devices still remain in one form or another from the times of the Great Crusade, and even from the Dark Age of technology. The Adeptus Mechanicus has a monopoly on advanced technology in the Imperium, although the Mechanicus does uphold its side of the bargain with the Imperium by supplying it with ships, tanks, advanced weapons, and so on. The Mechanicus has been known to hold back certain technologies for itself. What would happen if every Imperial Guardsman was armed with a plasma pistol or a Volkite blaster and powered armor instead of a lasgun and thin body armor? In the short story Knights of the Imperium by Graham McNeill, there is a conversation between Cassia, the wife of Sir Malcolm, a pilot of an Imperial Knight, and Mnemonix, a tech priest who is trying to help Malcolm win the next cull and become leader of his house in exchange for Malcolm bringing House Cadmus back under the banner of Mars. "I can help Malcolm," he said. "I can help him win the next cull and give Cadmus the leader it deserves. I can arrange for his knight to be upgraded with Mechanicus technologies without anyone knowing. Enhanced target acquisition protocols, weapon modifications, and the like. Won't the sacristans know about something like that?" Mnemonix shook his head, and even though his face was obscured, she sensed his amusement. "Sacristans, please. Who do you think trains them? They provide rote maintenance, following basic rituals of consecration and nothing more. None would even know what they were looking at, let alone its purpose." To me, this passage indicates that the Mechanicus does have access to technologies much more advanced than what they make available to the Imperium. Furthermore, the Mechanicus holds these technologies back and doesn't explain their existence or their use to anyone outside of the cult. If even the sacristans, who are trained by the Mechanicus and whose responsibility it is to fix and maintain Imperial Knights, would not even know what they were looking at when faced with such devices, then it stands to reason that such advanced technology could be hiding in plain sight, not just in Imperial Knights, but also in starships and the various vaults and databases scattered throughout the Imperium of Man. A prime example of advanced technology still in use by the Adeptus Mechanicus is the Archmagos. Though rare, These almost mythical ships are seldom brought to battle. When they do enter combat, they can bring to bear nearly impenetrable defenses and weaponry whose range and firepower puts even that of Imperial battleships to shame. And Archmagos is also outfitted with industrial capabilities rivaling that of many Hive cities, with kilometre upon kilometre of manufactoria, refineries, crackling plasma reactors and laboratories, test ranges, chemical vats and gene bays. The Speranza. One Archmagos in particular which I would like to talk about is the Speranza, featured in the trilogy Forge of Mars by Graham McNeill. The Speranza is an Archmagos that served as part of Magos Lexel-Kotov's explorator fleet into the region of space known as the Halo Zone. The Speranza was equipped with powerful ancient graviton beam weapons that could create miniature black holes and chrono weapons that were capable of shifting their target nanoseconds into the past. In the novels written by McNeill, it is revealed that the Speranza, an incredibly old and massive ship used by the Adeptus Mechanicus to explore new stellar territories, has some of the most advanced technological achievements of mankind embedded in its very structure. This revelation was only discovered when one of the main protagonists of the novel, Archmagos Lexel-Kotov, made some sort of direct mental connection with the machine spirit of the Speranza in order to save them from Eldar vessels attacking them and from an evil Archmagos Telok who intends on conquering Terra and Mars and becoming the new Fabricator General. Kotov, in linking with the Speranza's AI and convincing it to help, resulted in the Speranza deploying all kinds of unimaginably high-tech targeting systems that nobody on board even knew it had. Systems that were capable of functioning with 100% precision in the middle of a space-time gravitational storm, and detected and fatally damaged an Eldar cruiser in one shot using a dorsal-mounted black hole cannon involving the use of antimatter and dark matter. What makes this story even better is the fact that the Eldar vessel was guided by a Farseer, and thus managed to actually dodge the weapon's blast. This was no problem for the Speranza, which instead of simply letting the Eldar cruiser avoid the blast, followed up with a chronogun which shifted the Eldar ship a nanosecond into the past to make the black hole shot connect. The Speranza essentially teleported the Eldar ship back in time so it wouldn't have to turn around and fire again. Ultimately, after the connection with the Speranza's AI, Kotov forgot all knowledge surrounding the true capabilities of the Archmagos. The events described in these books show us that the Archmagos ships, which the Imperium already own and operate, already contain the lost knowledge of the STCs mankind lost after the Dark Age of technology came to an end. However, it seems that not even an Archmagos is able to access the information unless the ship AI allows it. And even if a tech priest is permitted to access the information after interfacing with the machine spirit, he or she will no longer be allowed to remember what took place once the link with the machine spirit has been severed. I put forward that should mankind ever have an existential threat such as the Tyranids, making it as far as attacking Earth or Mars, then the weapons on board the Archmagos ships would be sufficient to eliminate any Hive fleet threatening the two homeworlds. I'm not saying that the Adeptus Mechanicus would be able to awaken or convince the machine spirit to hand over all the knowledge contained in the STCs and then enable the Imperium to simply march around the galaxy in hyper-advanced ships, destroying all opposition along the way. What I am saying, however, is that the Mechanicus, when faced with an existential threat, such as an invasion of Mars or the loss of almost every forge world in the Segmentum Solar, would open the doors to every vault and hidden technology they have at their disposal to defend themselves in such a dire situation. There are two vaults in particular which could potentially save mankind from extinction from a Tyranid invasion. The first is the Librarius Omnis. The Librarius Omnis is a vast subterranean, continent-spanning repository of knowledge located in the labyrinthine catacombs of Mars. Over the millennia, it has been the subject of several techno-archaeologist expeditions. It was here, at the dawn of the Imperium, that the legendary techno-archaeologist Arkan Land led an expedition with the intention of finding an intact, complete, and still functioning STC database. Though he was unsuccessful in this endeavor, he did make two other discoveries which revolutionized Imperial technological thinking for millennia to come. A near-complete data slab image of STC information on what would come to be known as a land raider, and information on rare antigravitic plates and theories on their uses, which eventually led to the construction of the first land speeder. The Mechanicus takes great pains to retrieve and study archaeotech, such as artificial intelligence, which would significantly empower the Imperium, enough to be able to defeat the Tyranids. However, the Mechanicus considers AI to be abominable intelligence, which is tech heresy. So only the most radical or heretical would knowingly turn on dangerous AI. In addition, some artifacts too complex or holy may end up in these vaults. I argue that if the Imperium was to utilize the technologies hidden in the Librarius Omnis, then it would stand a good chance of uncovering weapons which would allow it to defeat the Hive mind. The other vault which I'd like to talk about is the Omega Vault. The Omega Vault is a sealed series of ancient engines, catacombs, and chambers that sit at the heart of the Death Watch's watch fortress Ariok in the Jericho Reach. The Omega Vault has been part of the watch fortress since it was established in the Jericho Reach, though what it contains at its center remains unknown to any human now living. No living being can open the doors of the vault. They open themselves at the command of mysterious ancient devices at the heart of the vault itself. The Omega Vault is known to yield up a portion of its cryptic artifacts and information in direct response to events unfolding within the Jericho Reach. There is also evidence that the central database of Watch Fortress Ariok is bound to something deep within the Omega Vault. The vault has, on occasion, responded to new information sent in from watch stations or operational reports from Death Watch missions by revealing a portion of what was placed within it many millennia ago. However, this process is filled with mystery, particularly as to whether the vault's actions are based entirely on a preordained sequence or are at least partially reactive in nature. My theory is that an AI could be involved which judges each situation and whether it merits a response from the vault. Perhaps, most tellingly, there are numerous events of great import that have transpired in the Jericho Reach and failed to trigger any response from the vault. Most recently, for example, there was the incursion of the Tyranid threat into the Orpheus salient. So far, this event has drawn no response from the vault, although specific dangers since, caused by the Tyranids, have triggered activity within the Omega Vault. It is an enigma that continues to trouble the thoughts of the Death Watch Space Marines and Inquisitors alike. Only one chamber has ever been discovered and unlocked each time the Omega Vault opens itself. Once whatever awaits in the open chamber has been removed, the vault seals itself again. In the past, the vault has provided tomes of archaic lore, strange fragments of alien devices, ancient weapons forged in times long gone, world-slaying virus canisters, enigmatic star charts, and bizarre xenological specimens. On one occasion, its gift was an ancient astropath held in a stasis field. When awoken, the astropath sent one brief astropathic message and spoke 2 words before expiring from extreme old age. His final duty, discharged. At the center of the Omega Vault lies another, inner vault, a secret of secrets, bound with scores of locking mechanisms which have slowly opened themselves one by one down the centuries. The Chamber of Vigilance believes that sealed within this chamber is the final truth and perhaps the last weapon the Death Watch will have need for in the Jericho Reach. One thing, however, is certain, and that is that the creators of the Omega Vault were human, a truth shown by the fact that contained within the vault's air is a powerful synthetic pathogen that is entirely inert outside the Omega Vault's walls. This pathogen is an ancient and unreplicable weapon, utterly lethal to all kinds of life save one, mankind. If the Omega Vault contains such advanced technology and powerful weaponry, which are only released in times of mankind's greatest need, I would argue that if the Tyranids start to devour significant portions of the Imperium, in particular around the Jericho Reach, then whatever is controlling the Vault will make available whatever technology or weapons are needed to defeat the Tyranid threat. In conclusion, I would put forth the argument that the Imperium of Man, in its current state, is unable to defeat the Tyranids on its own. However, if the Imperium was able to ally itself with a major galactic power such as the Eldar or Necrons, even if it was only a short-lived alliance of convenience, then the combined forces would be able to turn the Tyranids back and even defeat them completely in the Milky Way galaxy. However, given the Imperium's xenophobic tendencies, I believe that things would have to become truly desperate for the Imperium to forego its xenophobia and establish a workable alliance with any of the Xeno races. Both the Eldar and the Necrons have access to powerful technologies, which when combined with the sheer numbers and industrial output of the Imperium, would be sufficient to defeat the Tyranid Hive fleets invading the Milky Way galaxy. I don't believe that luring the Tyranids to attack Orc or Chaos planets would be wise, and could even backfire. Imagine Tyranid bioforms with the strength and resilience of the Orcs built into them, or Tyranid Hive fleets that are battle-hardened and specialized in combating the forces of the Warp, such as Hive Fleet Kronos. Tyranid swarms that have been bolstered by the psychic powers absorbed from Psychers living on demon worlds. If the Tyranids penetrated deep into the Segmentum Solar and threatened Terra or Mars, then it is conceivable that the Adeptus Mechanicus would open up every vault, database, and track down every trace of an STC containing information which would enable them to build weapons sufficient to turn back the Hive fleets. The machine spirits on board the various Archmagos ships would be far more likely to assist the Imperium should mankind be faced with an existential threat, and then help the Imperium wipe the Tyranids off the map with weapons left over from the Dark Age of technology. What do you think? Could the Imperium succeed in defeating the Tyranids? Are there any other technologies or strategies mentioned in the lore which haven't been mentioned? Feel free to leave your comments below and like this video. Thank you for watching.